Hi YouTube, today we're going to be turning all of this into this. Okay, so this is going to be my first gaming PC build on the channel. This PC is going to be for the person with a budget in mind. This hasn't cost a lot money-wise. Some of the parts are new, some of the parts are used, which I've managed to source pretty much almost as new. So let's have a closer look at the components. Okay, so at the heart of the system, we're going to be using the Fatality AB350 Gaming ITX/AC motherboard. This is from ASRock. It only supports 2 DIMMs, but that's all we need really for this system. The PCI Express 16 lane is PCI Express 3.0. It does come with 2 HDMI graphics ports if you do use a Ryzen CPU with a built-in GPU. It sports 7.1 high definition audio from Realtek. It has 4 SATA 3 ports. It does have an NVMe M2 PCI Gen 3 slot on the back of the motherboard. It also has 3 USB 3.1 Gen ports. There are 3 on the rear. There is 1 Type-C and there's also 2 for the front header. It comes with Intel Gigabit LAN and Intel 802.11ac Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 4.2. So this is a really good motherboard all round, has all the features that you could possibly need. And if you go to ASRock's website, if you download and flash the BIOS to the latest version, it also supports all Ryzen CPUs to date of recording this video. Okay, for the brains of the operation, we're going to be using the AMD Ryzen 5 2600. This is a CPU that came out in 2018. I managed to pick this one up for £80 boxed with the cooler. It had been used, but the owner said that they had never overclocked it. This processor comes with 6 cores, 12 threads, runs at 3.4 GHz and will boost up to 3.9 GHz. And it has a total of 16 megabytes level 3 cache. And this processor only uses 65 watts of power. And for the memory, we're going to be using Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 running at 32 MHz. We have 2 8GB sticks in red. For graphics, we're going to be using the MSI GeForce GTX 1650. This is the Ventus XS Overclocked edition. It comes with 4 GB of GDDR5. And has a boost clock of 1740 MHz. Comes complete with DisplayPort, HDMI and DVI, depending on how you connect your monitor. The other good thing about this graphics card is it does not require any external PCI Express power, so you can just drop it in the slot and off you go. And speaking of power, here we have the Corsair TX 550M. This is a 550 watt 80 plus gold power supply. It comes complete with 7 years warranty and is semi-modular, so you only need to connect the extra peripheral cables that you really need. And finally, it's out of its box. Here we have the case we're going to house everything in. This is the Corsair Carbide Spec Alpha case. This case is now discontinued and there are newer versions within the Carbide range, which you can pick up for approximately the same amount as I paid for this. This is a really nice case, designed for full ATX, even though we only have an ITX motherboard for this build. It comes with 2 red LED fans built in the front, which are 120mm. There's a 120mm exhaust fan at the rear. We have 2 USB 3.0 ports on the front of the case. Also headphone and microphone jacks if you wish to use this for streaming. There are plenty of videos out there on YouTube where you can learn how to build a PC. So I'm just going to crack on, get it all put together and show you the final product. If you would like me to do a demonstration building a PC, I could do this a bit further on down the line in the form of a live stream. So let me know if you would like me to do that. And if it does go ahead, then make sure you are subscribed and you've hit the bell notification so you know when I've uploaded the next video or I'm about to go live. Okay, so here we are hovering above the city of Stormwind in World of Warcraft. As you can see, there is amazing draw distance. We're getting around about 90 frames per second. If I drop into the graphics settings, we can see that the settings are set to 1080p and the graphics quality is on 10, so everything is on ultra or high. If we do put vertical sync on, this will limit the graphics card to 60 frames per second, which is what the monitor runs at. So if you look at the top left corner here, we can see that the GPU is being utilized at 99%. As soon as we enable this and limit the graphics down to 60 frames per second, that will drop down. So now we're only running at 72% on the graphics. So if you do have a monitor that doesn't have a necessarily high refresh rate, then what you can do is just put vertical sync on, and that will limit the amount of GPU power that you're using. So if we just hover down, have a fly around, you can see that this is pretty nice. One thing I did forget to mention is that this whole video has been recorded at 20 frames per second, unfortunately. So if it doesn't look super great on the frame rate, believe me, it is. And obviously the benchmark is there on the screen to show that it is running at those refresh rates. Anyway, let's get back to another game. Okay, so our next game is Doom 2016. As we can see, we're around about 90 frames per second. We're in a busy area where there's a lot of people. I don't really want to attract the attention just yet. But like I said before, the GPU is now at 97%. So if we go into settings and we go to video and we turn on vertical sync, so it will cap it to 60 frames per second. Then we can go back into the game, and as we can see now, we are now comfortable at 60 frames per second, and the GPU is now at 67%, which is quite good. Okay, so next up is everybody's favourite CSGO. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the overlay to work for some reason, so I've just used the command line interface to show in the top left corner that we are running 120, 130 frames per second, and in some areas it does peak at 200 frames per second. So yeah, I'm sorry about that. I just don't know why that didn't work. Okay, so next up we're in the Unigine Heaven benchmark. Our settings are 1920 by 1080, anti-aliasing off, and that's pretty much it. So that's running. It's running quite comfortably. Obviously this is only GTX 1650, so you're not going to get stupidly high frame rates. But as you can see, all the CPU cores are sitting comfortably around 54 degrees C. The GPU is around 54 degrees C as well, and the GPU is running around about 98% of its capacity, and we're not even using a third of the GPU memory either, so that is quite good. Okay, so our next benchmark is Unigine Heaven, and this is around about the same. We're running at the same temperatures. Everything seems to be running swimmingly great. We are fluctuating frame rates approximately from 40 frames per second all the way up to 120 frames per second, depending on the scenery. But yeah, this is running comfortably and is pushing the GPU to 99% of its capacity. Okay, so finally we're on Cinebench R15. So let's give the CPU a run for its money. The one thing that I did forget to mention in the build guide of all the parts that we're using was the SSD. Now this came bundled with the motherboard that I got second hand, and it's a lesser known unbranded essentially Samsung SSD, which has a peak read of 2150 megabytes per second and a write of 1500 megabytes per second. But for this system it is absolutely amazing and does the job perfectly, and of course it's faster than a SATA connected SSD. Okay, so there we go. We've had a score of 1103. I did run this previously and it did get 1239, which seems a little bit strange. That's a bit of a jump in speed. This processor is completely stock. It's not overclocked, and it does have the standard AMD cooler on there. So let's just run it one more time and see how it gets on. One thing I would like to mention is, although this says here Windows 8, it is actually Windows 10. That's a glitch within Cinebench. And as you can see, just above that line there, we are 6 cores, 12 threads at the standard speed of 3.4 gigahertz. Yeah, so it's not too bad. It's to be expected. It is faster than a 4th generation i7 at standard speeds. Not quite up to Intel Xeon speeds, but you know, it's great. It does exactly what it needs to. And the other thing about this processor versus that Xeon is it supports other rendering extensions that you don't get with a CPU that's 10 years older than this. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with this system. And it plays games perfectly at 60 frames per second, which is all you need if you've got a monitor like mine, which only does 60 hertz. There's no point having all those extra frames rendered if you're not going to see them. So my advice is, as long as it goes faster than 60 frames per second, if you have got a vertical sync available as an option within the game, then put it on. Obviously it'll reduce everything down and keep it at a nice steady 60 frames per second. You're not going to overwork your GPU, your system's not going to start getting too warm and fans start whizzing up, and it's going to be great. Speaking of fans, this machine, the fans have not ramped up once. I've ran games, I've ran benchmarks as you've seen, and the fans have pretty much just stayed at stock speed. So I'm really impressed. It's nice and quiet, it's nice and fast, and it plays the majority of games that I own at high ultra settings. And if you did want to play some more modern AAA games, then I'm sure that this would handle them at medium settings, no problem. Okay folks, so that was my first PC gaming build. That was the Ryzen 5 2600 6-core processor, 32 gigs of RAM, the Fatality ITX motherboard from ASRock, 512 budget range SSD from Samsung, all housed in a lovely Corsair case with a Corsair 550 watt power supply. So if you do want to build any of this system or something very similar, all the links to all the parts that are still available will be in the description below. If they're not available anymore, because I know the case was definitely discontinued, I will place a link to an alternative. So thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, share this video with everyone you know, and of course hit the bell icon so you get notified for the next video.